Good morning. I'm Angie. I am the little teacher on the prairie, and every year I get asked, where do I begin my math instruction? So I always try to start with our unit one focuses on basic multiplication. So for my striving learners, the thing I notice is when I ask them, what strategy do you prefer to use when you multiply? Because I'm not a huge flashcard or timed test teacher. Now, there's nothing wrong with those. There's nothing like those are a tool as well too. It's just not one I usually start with personally. So for my striving learners, they often don't have that entry point, that strategy. So we make this anchor chart together. You can see I just started with the title, multiplication strategies. Now, I do have a TpT Store, the little teacher on the prairie, students on the carpet, and make it with them you can. So by starting with arrays, you're going to give them that visual. The nice thing about that is that even if this is an extension, like if you are a second or even a third grade teacher starting this right away at the beginning of the year, you are going to give them a visual for what multiplying actually really is. Oftentimes I have some of my highest learners who can tell me 6 times 8 is 48, but when I ask them, how do you know, they aren't able to tell me that. So what I tell my students is going across, I look at how much room I have. I always try to start with a bigger number if I have more room this way. So I made 4 dots going this way, and the other number is going to show me how many times I have to draw that row of dots. Now, my students and I actually do array posters as well, and that's another video for another time that I can show you. And it's always interesting, even some of my highest learners, how much they struggle to grasp those directions and things like that. So this is where you can wait and show your students as you count the dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That is how you get your answer product. So the next strategy we look at, because eventually you're going to want to move away from drawing the dots, especially as you get into those fact families with larger numbers, is repeated addition. So you want your students to pick up on the fact that whenever we multiply, that it always is repeating a number. Now, if you're going to use this strategy, I always remind students, I like to start with the bigger number because then I have to repeat it less times. But if you think they're going to struggle to count all the way up to 7 and 7 again and 7 again, obviously you can switch it to a smaller number. You could even repeat the same number over and over. So I always tell them I start with the bigger number, and then the other number tells me how many times do I need to put that into my addition equation. So that when we count it, then we have 7 plus 7 is 14, and then we count up 7 more. And of course, that gives us our 21. So usually the first day I just start with these 2 strategies, especially because we do in my classroom, we do make them in our math notebooks. If your students would struggle with that fine motor, that writing, again, I have these already created for you in my TpT Store under the Little Teacher on the Prairie. The third strategy is one that we will use the rest of the year as well as numbers get larger. I call it multiple tower, has that great vocabulary word for multiple in it. Now, this one, again, I'm going to use a different equation. You could use the same one over and over. So you could show them how you can actually count by both numbers and how you should land on each one. But the idea of multiple tower, why I connect those two, is my students often have a lot of trouble telling the difference between a factor and a multiple. But we talk about how a tower gets bigger, whereas a factor, if you want the math fact, those are the 2 numbers in the math fact. We also play the game Factor Ninja as well, but I, again, like to choose that larger number and put that at the bottom of my tower. Then we count, if that's the number we're going to count by, this number tells me how many factors I need. So 8 plus 8, count that out to 16, plus 8 more, count it up to 24, plus 8 more, we count up to 32. And how I know if I keep going or not is the other number tells me I had to count 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 32 must be my answer product. The last strategy that I show them works well if you are going to do larger numbers. So we call this one jump to a landmark number. So those landmark numbers are numbers that some kids will call easy count bys. So I'm going to up the ante here a little bit with a higher number. You might want to do 8 times 6, maybe 9s if somebody in the younger grades has shown them how to use their fingers with 9s. I don't usually encourage tricks like that because they aren't based in number and they get confident with them, but they don't know how they work. So absolutely you can use them for efficiency, but I still teach them to use these strategies. So a landmark number, I always look at these. Now, if I know 5s are pretty close to 6s, that landmark fact would be 9 times 5. And most of my students coming to 4th grade can count up by 5s and land on 45. This is where they often get stuck. They don't know whether to add another 5 or whether to add the 9, so they usually just pick one and go with that. So what we have to talk about is looking for the number that is the same in the fact family. That we look for the numbers that's the same, and that is the number that we are going to add to get our correct answer product. So if 9 is the same, I'm going to put 45 in my head. I'm going to add 9 more, or sometimes we talk about we could add 10 and take away 1, whatever level you think your learners are at, and we should land at the answer product 54. So these are the first 4 strategies that I use in my classroom. Feel free to use them as a starting point for yours as well, whether you are doing some math intervention or some math extension.